So welcome, everyone. During the course of our time together, we will be exploring a variety of themes. Those themes invite us into an exploration of interfaith action and global peace building. They are illustrated by the different parts of the purpose statement of URI. And the first part of that purpose statement is building peace through promoting enduring daily interfaith cooperation. I'm joined on the panel today in this session with a remarkable group of peace builders who I have to kind of use binoculars to see the end of the dear friends who are involved in a variety of ways in engaging peace, justice, and healing in the world, internationally, locally, through their work in faith-based organizations, in humanitarian organizations, and it's just a joy to be with them. We want to open this theme of what is interfaith action? How do we understand that? How does interfaith action fit into the larger framework of peace building? And we'll explore the field of interfaith peace building and its relationship between interfaith understanding, interfaith dialogue, interfaith action through a variety of lenses: community-based social action lenses, educational lenses, social work, a variety of ways of engagement. We are missing an original panel member, dear friend Mohammed Abu-Nimer, who along with his colleague from KAICIID was called back to Austria to deal with circumstances there that we send our prayers for. It is our great joy, and my particular great joy, to welcome Maria Crespo to this panel. Maria serves as Director of Cooperation Circle Support for URI. She is located in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She maintains the communications of URI around the world, but when I visited her in Argentina, I got to see the lifetime's worth of work in bringing people of all beliefs together and into relationship with sectors of society like the mayor's office and educational institutions. She has worked throughout Latin America, and you will hear more from her, and we welcome you, Maria. I will not go into detailed bios. They are in your program, but I will just acknowledge that Reverend Jennifer Bailey, founder and executive director of Faith Matters Network and powerful voice in this work, has joined us. Jen, welcome. Chief Phil Lane, who was here at the beginning of URI, has done work across North America, but around the world, indigenous rights, bringing his heartful, justice-based, powerful teachings and wisdom and call to action to all of us. Phil, welcome. Yes, please. Audrey Kitagawa, chair of the Parliament of the World's Religions, just one of so many things that Audrey does in this world to bring peace, justice, and healing into the world. Audrey, welcome. We welcome Rabbi Daniel Lehman. Now, Daniel and I have a history together because we started on the East Coast before we both ended up on the West Coast, and it is such a joy to have he now serves as president of the Graduate Theological Union, the GTU, located in Berkeley. Danny, welcome to the panel. So I went to France some time ago. It was actually when the World Cup was happening. And in addition to watching the World Cup with Radia, I got to see the organization that she and her brothers and sisters have built, Coexister, which she will tell you about, which is this remarkable organization in France that works throughout the world and through educational systems to transform communities into interfaith, multi-faith entities. So Radia, welcome. There is no place that I know of in this country where the work of interfaith councils is more impactful than in the Bay Area. It is an extraordinary thing. You'll hear more about that tonight. But one of the guiding forces in the San Francisco area between the remarkable work of the Interfaith Council and its work with government officials, with human rights, with housing and homelessness, you'll hear more about it, is Michael Pappas. Welcome, Michael. So we'd like to start by having each of our panelists say a little bit about orienting their work in the context of the question of interfaith action in global peace building. Tell us a little bit about their work, why they do this, and help us to understand what we mean by interfaith action and what this movement, if indeed it is a movement, that we're a part of. So let me start with Maria. Maria, tell us about your work and what you've been doing for these many years.
So when I hear interfaith dialogue, I imagine wonderful leaders of different religions standing or sitting in front of a panel, going back to their communities and doing their work. I experienced through URI the difference between interfaith dialogue and interfaith dialogue for action. And this action piece is the one that I want to underline today. And it has been a wonderful experience for me down in Buenos Aires. URI has a double strategy. We do work. We want to make a change. We educate. We protect the earth. We respect human rights. We do several things in an interfaith context. So, when we do this, and we are people from different religions, we get to know each other, and we appreciate each other, and we become friends. So there's the change that we are bringing to the world together with the trust we are building. And I want to focus on these two things, action and trust. Because when you do things together, you start trusting. And it is so important to build trust in order to really have an enduring daily interfaith cooperation. Let me tell you a story. It was 2008, and I was in my URI office in Buenos Aires, and I got a call from US Embassy. And they said, well, there's not much interfaith work for youth in Argentina. Would you dare to do something with youth? I am a courageous woman, so I said yes. But then they said, well, you know, you have to do this in 5 days because we need to decide that. And we want you to compete with this rabbi and this Muslim community for the money that we can give you. Oh, no. So what did I do? Went back to the office and said, Rabbi, Sergio, please, we are not going to compete, are we? Let us do a project together. Went to my Muslim friend and said, tell me, Beitullah, we are not going to compete, are we? Let us do something together. And this is an ad for women. So the rabbi said, well, you know, I have so many things to do. My sister can help you. And so Marisa was there, and the man said, I have plenty of things to do. Why don't you tell Gabriela, my wife, to help you? So there we were, 3 wonderful women. All of us had a lot of things to do, between brackets. But there we were, 3 wonderful women, 5 days to work on a project to present with budget, goals, everything. Okay, we did it. And we presented the project. The money was awarded to the project. The project started 2009. We gathered, in the 10 years that we have been there, we gathered hundreds of young people that worked together. And what was fantastic of this team of young people is, first, they learned a little bit of each of the religions in the group. Then they shared, and we had camps together and time together. And the third, and I think the best thing, is they built. They worked together in concrete action. So there was a group that decided that they would do an interfaith calendar. The other group decided that they were going to have the first pizza party, interfaith pizza party. And so when these young people came with this pizza and the different signs of the religions on top of the pizza, this was really strange. But they did it. And they kept doing this, and then we enter in the fourth phase, that is multiply. So since then, there have been different groups of young people doing things together and becoming friends because they are together. So this, I think, is the secret of Bridge Builders, the project that we built 10 years ago. Beautiful. Because this is done with young people, and everybody wants young people at the table, many faith-based organizations, many interfaith organizations, and even the government has been calling us to participate in different events, bring the knowledge, the experience, and the action into interfaith. And this, from the first call, my recommendation, or what I think was the best practice, is we build trust, enduring, daily. We do things together. And if we do things together, we build trust, and this trust will keep forever. In Spanish, we have a saying that says, orada la piedra. And this means that you pierce the stone. And to pierce a stone, it is not just a panel. It is not just a great conference. It is working together, building trust every day in concrete action. Beautiful. And this is my message to you today. Let us do that together.
Thank you. So we're going to do an emergent design moment, given this is such a long line. I'm calling upon my sister, Sadhvi, to be ready with a 1-minute little sign, because so that when I give you the cue, you can let folks know that that's about how much time they have left. How's that? Okay. No, you were perfect. You were actually just perfect. Jen.
Hey, y'all. My name is Reverend Jennifer Bailey, and I bring you greetings from the South, from Nashville, Tennessee, in my community. All right, Southerners. In my community at Faith Matters Network, we are a group that does work with faith leaders, community organizers, and activists here in the United States, focused on what we call spiritual sustainability. So thinking about what it takes for us to be involved in the work of social change, of peace building, over the long haul, because we know many of the challenges that we're facing are generational challenges. I so appreciate your reflection on trust, because one of the things that we've learned in our work is that relationships, as we know, move at the speed of trust, but social change moves at the speed of relationships. And so as we reflect on our work, I thought I would share a story that I think illustrates the way in which we've been thinking about social change work through Faith Matters Network, and in particular, the role of faith leaders as accompanying those on the front lines of social change. So about a year ago, actually it was a year ago next week, I found myself standing on holy ground 480 miles south of here at Chicano Park in San Diego, California. For those who don't know, Chicano Park is a historic space. In 1970, there was a sit-in movement led by the residents of Barrio Logan, largely Mexican Americans and recent immigrants who were resisting the city's impulse to build environmental justice violations all around them. And so they took back their land. They sat in and said no more, and created a green space that now houses the United States' largest collection of outdoor murals, as a way of reclaiming space and saying no more to the injustice that those communities were facing. So I found myself in Barrio Logan and on this sacred holy ground as part of a 1,000-person protest led by a group called Mi Gente, that was protesting and led by those most directly impacted by recent changes in immigration policy and the family separation policy of our current administration. And my task there was to serve as rallying the faith folk. Because so often we've experienced in community organizing in the United States that faith folk tend to show up in their collars or with their religious garb and really want the microphone. And so my job was to coach those faith folks not to take the microphone, but instead be led as we were by the children who had been directly impacted and the families and the communities that had been most directly impacted, and have their backs, literally, and their sides. And I think what the folks with Mi Gente and the folks who founded Chicano Park knew was what abolitionist Frederick Douglass knew, that power cedes nothing without demand, and it never will. But the question for us today, as we think about what the role of interfaith work is in peace building and changing our communities, is thinking uniquely about what is it that we have to offer. And I'd like to offer three things very quickly. I'm a preacher in the Black church, so I had to have my 3-point sermon ready for y'all. Three things very quickly. This is a reflection from my dear colleague at Faith Matters Network, Corinne Luck. She recently published a blog for the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict, identifying the role that faith and spiritual leaders are playing in movements at this time. And Corinne offered three reflections. The first is, right now, faith and spiritual leaders are creating new and reimagined roles to support the sustainability and sustain unity of nonviolent movements. Roles like the movement chaplain. So around the country, there are young people who are being trained just to provide spiritual and emotional support to frontlines organizers and see that as their vocation. So we see a growing ecosystem of work, largely led by folks like me who graduated from seminary and didn't know what to do with that degree, right? But who see themselves as wanting to be engaged vocationally in social change work. Second, we see people around the country drawing from and on ancestral practices and rituals as a tool for transformational resistance. I think about my colleagues at groups like Harriet's Apothecary that are reclaiming ancestral practices that root everything from song to dance to herbs as part of a healing process for not just our country, but for our movements. Recognizing that pause and caring for ourselves is part of what it takes to implement social change work, lest we all become burnt out. And finally, an observation that Corinne made is that spiritual practice that fosters compassionate participation in civil resistance and diverse movement ecosystems is key to our work. We learned a lot about this from our friends at the Buddhist Peace Fellowship, so folks that are just across the bay in Oakland who've been doing really transformational work, incorporating Buddhist practice, a notion of what they call block, build, be, to figure out how they show up deeply for movements in these times. So I share those three reflections. I'm excited to talk to y'all about what's going on in your neck of the woods and learn from you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Phil, welcome.
My very, very beloved relatives of the human family, I'd like to extend a very, very warm and loving handshake and embrace to each and every one of you. I'm so thankful to be sitting in the presence of those spiritual representatives of all who have gone before us. You are their representative of this physical plane of existence, so I really feel so honored to sit here with this very distinguished panel. For me, how we practice, or how I practice the best I can, this daily effort, this relentless effort that each and every one of us I know is committed to in a good way, is to remember, first of all, the prior unity and oneness of the human family. It's a basic foundation of global peace. We are one human family. That's who we are. Scientifically, it's very clear, 99.9% we're genetically the same, except for secondary dimensions of us. One's right here. In the same way, in a spiritual way, we know we're one. Like great Hakasapa Black Elk said, the center of the universe is everywhere. That means in everybody. Another of our sacred teaching says this: our first counsel is this: possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that yours may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. And I can say it 75 winters. Another thing I'm learning every day. Every day, I'm learning a little more compassion for being old. Yeah. My dad said, you just wear out. And it's true. But the whole purpose of this life, just like it was in the womb of our mother, was to grow our our physical arms and legs and eyes and ears and eyes and lungs, was to give us strength after we were born to this world. And so is this earth suit, kind of like my womb suit. So what's my purpose? My purpose to grow spiritual arms and legs and eyes and ears and feet and eyes. Because I'll tell you, I can find it out real quick. When it's time to go back to Mother Earth, I look forward to going to the other side camp. And I look forward to knowing that my purpose here on Mother Earth is to grow spiritually. And to grow spiritually means, in understanding oneness, means I have to see every other human being. When I look inside their eyes, I must see the Creator, the beautiful Creator. I must look beyond that to see the beautiful, lovely, kind daughter and girl. Another one of our Dakota teachings says this. It says, you must not rest until you make everybody you know a brother or a sister, a mother or father, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew, so forth and so on, to every dimension. So that's what I challenge us to do while we're here. I challenge you to look around. Here's an elder. I can see that, an elder. I see lots of nieces and nephews. So I'll have a rich family by the time I leave. That's what I love about going to China. There's about 1.4 billion new relatives there. I'm happy about that. I want to say this. I really want to thank the United Religions Initiative in meeting Bill Swing in 1996. My father, my mother, we met him. And I was thrilled by his thought, because I happened to have gone with greatest expectation, with all due respect, in 1973 to the United Nations, expecting everybody to be talking and praying, and that was a rude awakening. But I did get a chance to do a little praying there one time, so it was okay. But when I saw, especially that St. Francis ceremony with all the dogs and the cats, and he invited me to sing when I did, all the dogs sang with me. That was a good one. But when he said and talked about, why not have a United Religions Initiative? And why not? Because we have a choice here to make. We are right now going like this, right down the tube, as our prophecies promised. Across the Americas, our prophecies of our sacred teachers promise exactly what we're facing today. We have a choice to come together in unprecedented unified action based in the spiritual teachings of kindness, compassion, forgiveness, love, kindness, humor. That's a good one. But to come together as one human family, understanding the hurt of one is the hurt of all. And I have to say, we have to go now to the Platinum Rule. The Platinum Rule says, treat others as they would like to be treated. Treat others as they would like to be treated. It's fine when everybody has the same values. It's beautiful, the Golden Rule. But now we have many cultures. We have many, many members of our human family who have learned different ways of doing things. So let's learn about them. Learn about the Ohlone people in whose land, so beautifully Stanford said, unshredded, unceded land, which is true. So, just a couple of last things. How am I doing? 1 minute. Okay. I got to throw get my dads in there. My dad always said this, and I hope for every one of you here. He said, son, if you can't be happy today, what day are you waiting for? Good question, huh? So let's be happy today. We've been given food to eat. 2 billion of our members of our human family don't have food to eat today. Clean water to drink. And look what we have. This incredible, beautiful place to be here. So let's give thanksgiving every bit of this day. How?
Thank you, Phil. Audrey, share with us some of your story.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. And I begin with expressions of gratitude to United Religions Initiative for this significant convening. And as chair of the Parliament of the World's Religions, I'm happy to be here as a paradigm of interfaith communities joining hands, working together, and supporting each other and each other's initiatives. And I think this paradigm is an important understanding for the whole world to undertake, whether it is among interfaith communities and religious communities coming together within their own communities. So it is my privilege to be here to support this important initiative. And I had the privilege of meeting a wonderful, enlightened person who said, where we are is the holy ground, and we must find God here and now. So it was a call for a personal commitment to utilize the particularization of my own encultured lens and to be willing to step into the commitment of being able to have a dilations of my own personal lens into the global lens, where I will be able to move beyond myself to understand that I am engaged in a world of many people, diverse colors, religions, and it is into that world that I make a personal commitment to live with the understanding that we have to be able to work together, join hands together, because there is no one person, no one government, no one organization that can tackle our global challenges alone. So it is in this spirit of cooperation and learning how to join hands and work together that it is very important that we have interfaith dialogue. And the important work that we do here today, as well as the work of the Parliament of the World's Religions, which is to be able to provide that dialogic platform where we are able to, in respectful ways, listen to the voices of others and their particular perspectives and allow the voices to come together and we learn from each other. To be willing to learn from each other states a personal commitment to humility, that we do not have the sole right to be able to say, my point of view is the truth and is the right way. But it is an understanding that everyone comes from their own particularized lens, and we're all working together to have the dilation of the particular to the global. And it is a privilege to be able to do that work every day and to hear the stories of the powerful people that is represented to the gift of sacred life. And so it is through this gift of sacred life that all of our works, individually and collectively, calls us to be in remembrance of the importance of life itself. And it is the return to the call of our values, whether it is the golden rule that is being articulated through these efforts and initiatives, or like Chief Lane this morning said, the platinum rule. It is an inherent understanding that we must have dignity in our life and afford that dignity to all those whose lives we touch. And with respect to the work of the Parliament of the World's Religions, we have this call to remember our values through a living document that is the Parliament's global ethic. And it is very important to share that with all of us, because it is the ethics in not only the regulation of our personal lives, but in the global space that we live in. So there are 5 points with respect to this living document, the Parliament's global ethic, and the 5 core aspects. Of course, it is quite a long document, so I'll just do the synopsis here. Would be the respect for life, the economic justice, the truth and compassion, women's rights, and care for the earth. So this consultative process that we have undertaken is a way for all of us to be able to engage in the going to ethics and how we are living our lives and how we start our global engagement together around the foundational values of ethics. And we are hopeful that we will be able to have this as the hub, the centrality of the work of the Parliament, through which all of the different projects that we undertake would be the spokes coming out of this important hub. So this is how, as an interfaith organization, we have the actual work that we would like to share with all of you. But basically, it is the return to the call of values, to remember that life is sacred, earth is sacred, and how we are able to manifest, demonstrate, and live what we believe in ways that help to foster the betterment of humanity and promote peace throughout the world. And while we have the privilege to be in this particularized form, in this time and space, I feel very privileged to be with each and every one of you who in your own right are beautiful points of light in that web, Indra's web, the web of life, where we come together and we can share this moment in time together. And for that, I thank you.
Danny, there's some remarkable things happening in education and in Berkeley, and you have now taken on this extraordinary task. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
So I come from the other college town across the bay in Berkeley. A little bit different than Palo Alto, but a lot of fun. And I want to thank Victor and the entire URI community for gathering us. I feel very blessed to be here. I just moved from the East Coast, as Victor mentioned, this past August, so I'm new to the area, and this is just a privilege to be with this assembly of people and sharing thoughts, ideas, and the power of this interreligious movement. So I want to suggest that the dichotomy that we've been working with and presented with in this session between dialogue and action is problematic, because running a graduate school of religious studies, which represents many of the world's traditions, I find that dialogue is itself action. And I want to make that point clear and emphasize it. And I think part of the problem is that we need to shift our language. In the 20th century, interreligious and ecumenical dialogue was a great accomplishment, and it was really an important step forward, especially the second half of the 20th century. I would like to suggest in the 21st century, we need to shift from interfaith dialogue to interfaith learning, and maybe even interreligious learning. And as someone who works in a graduate institution of interreligious study, I can tell you that that work of interreligious learning involves tremendous commitment to action and everyday action in engaging one another in understanding the other and in appreciating and celebrating not only the commonalities, but the differences that make this human family so rich, diverse, and beautiful. So I think we have to understand interreligious learning, deep understanding of one another as action in and of itself. And I would say, in my experience, and reflecting on the Graduate Theological Union and what we do, oftentimes I am concerned about the move to action which isn't rooted deeply in interreligious understanding. And I think especially those of us who grew up in this country with its pragmatic focus, we always want to get to this problem solving immediately or quickly. And I think we have to often pause and say, before we solve problems, we actually have to understand one another. And that takes some really deep learning, patience, and engagement. And it needs to happen regularly. It can't be just to get together to do a project. There has to be this common commitment to learning. And I can tell you my experience this past year at the Graduate Theological Union, we gathered together as a community after the attack in Pittsburgh, after the attack in New Zealand, after the attack in Sri Lanka, and we had these beautiful gatherings, these vigils, these memorial commemorations. But what made them powerful and compelling was the fact that they were rooted in this experience of deep learning and understanding that takes place daily between students and faculty. And obviously, we're privileged to be in that kind of academic setting, but that can take place outside of academia as well, and needs to. And I would like to posit, based on the word peace in Hebrew, shalom, which is also based on the root which means wholeness, shalem. And I want to present a visual metaphor. Instead of thinking about peace as something which is kind of unitary, think about a sculpture from a piece of marble. Instead of thinking about it that way, there's a 20th century Jewish sage who suggests we should think about it actually as a building. So we talk about building peace. Think about peace as a building, and I want to suggest a particular kind of building. Think of an arch made up of different stones, no cement, nothing keeping it together, except that those different stones are actually in tension with one another. They're actually physically engaged, and they're putting force on one another, but in an attempt to create a whole that is greater than the parts. They don't lose their individuality. They don't undermine the force, the power that they're presenting in relationship to one another, but they create this beautiful arch, which is a portal into a more peaceful, beautiful, blessed world. So think about that arch. Think about the wholeness that recognizes the distinctive qualities of the parts, but acting in relationship to one another to create a greater whole. I also want to suggest that we need to think not only about action. So first of all, interfaith dialogue, I think we should be thinking about it as interreligious learning. And I think the action part, which is critical, also needs to be thought of as the possibility of interreligious living. And I want to suggest that we need to go beyond programs, we need to go beyond projects. We actually have to create intentional, interreligious living communities. We need to have the everyday interaction with one another in our living space. And we need to create those opportunities to live together interreligiously with intentionality. So we need to move from interfaith dialogue to interreligious learning, I think. And I think we need to move from interfaith action to interreligious living. And I think one model of that that I'm privileged and blessed to be a part of is the Graduate Theological Union, because it's more than just a learning place, it's a living place. And I think it can be a model beyond graduate school, beyond academia. And I think we have to work together to create models of interreligious living and learning communities.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
When I was in Bordeaux, France, and was welcomed into the Coexister community, hundreds of young leaders in a democratically constructed social movement, Interfaith, which you're going to hear about, was one of the most remarkable experiences that I've had in this work. Radia, tell us about your work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victor. I'm honored to be here today in this panel and also in front of all of you. And Victor, you mentioned that you came to France for the World Cup last year. Well, the World Cup is still happening this year in France. And we are playing against America, the United States, on Friday. So I hope the fact that we're hosting, we're going to win. Well, I'm sorry for that. So yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, we in Coexister we try to offer everyone a good experience of interfaith diversity, and our purpose is to create impossible friendships that would have not happened outside of Coexister, because we have a problem. One of the issues in France is that we're not mixed. And we engaged in 10 years more than 10,000 young people, and Victor saw a part of it last year when he came to France. With the French perspective, I wanted to give you a few words of context. Is there a peace to build in France? Well, a large misconception in France, like inside of the population, but also like in the political point of view, they say no. Peace is obsolete. Like, we don't talk about peace in France. We've been in peace for 70 years on our territory in France, so we don't need to talk about that. But in Coexister, we do we have another point of view. Last year, the rise of the act of anti-Semitism rose on out of 78%, so it's huge. In the last 10 years, we had a lot of terrorist attacks with religion motivation. We also have in the last European elections, the first party is the National Front, which is the Rassemblement National now. You also maybe heard about the crisis of the yellow jacket. So what we say in Coexister that we have a problem in France of understanding each other. If we disagree with each other, we cannot be together. So we have to do something about it, and that's our work in terms of peace building. But is interfaith cooperation, interfaith action, interfaith dialogue a solution to that? We have a lot of diversities in France, and talking about faith is a taboo, is a problem, is an issue. We don't understand each other between people who believe and people who have beliefs but non-religious belief. It's a real issue, a real problem. But we can live by choice with other person from different beliefs. So how does it work? How do we do that in Coexister? And what is our point of view in terms of dialogue or action? You said, Maria, that like action can help us build trust. Well, we think that since we talk about our diversity, our differences, the fact that we disagree, we are proud to disagree in terms of our faith. And we agree to disagree, but we need something to agree on. And what we agree on is action, and is action with a purpose. In Coexister, what we call action is our solidarity work. So we choose a common action, a common cause that is very close to our heart. For example, environmental issues, gender equality, LGBT rights, and a lot of things like that. We are together on a common cause, and the common is something to be built. We are not focusing in dialogue. We do not focus on common points because it's easy to say, yeah, we are all the same. We don't say that in Coexister. We are different, and we agree to disagree, but we agree on doing things together. And the common things, it's something that we build. And I think that it's something that we forgot a little bit in France, because we focus on the fact that we are universalist, we are the country of the human rights, we are, you know, it's a very proud country. But actually there are some issues, and like, this is not gonna save France if we just say that, yeah, the only common things that we have is the human rights that, like, 100 years ago. Our common thing is something that we build every day. So that's why we talk about cooperation. Not only action, not only dialogue, but cooperation is both of these things. We also believe that interfaith cooperation is it's not a one-time thing. And I agree with you when you said about, like, a living situation. We do not meet a person in just 1 hour. We don't meet a person in just 2 hours. And it's not just because I met someone that is Jewish that I know everything about Judaism. Actually, we have to practice. Interfaith cooperation is a practice. Why a practice? Because when you practice, you want to improve. And we want to improve on how we can be together and how we can live together. It's something that we need to do every day, and that's, like in the title, we were talking about the daily interfaith action, and that's something really important. To meet the other, to understand the other, and to accept diversity, and to cooperate on a common ground, we need time, and it takes time, and it takes actually, like, our whole life. And to finish, of course, for me it's an interfaith cooperation, interfaith action is essential, a vital solution for peace building and to tackle the issues of violence and exclusion. And I would say that something that we sometimes forget in France is that we shouldn't just learn to make peace, because it means that a conflict already happened. We need to learn peace on a daily basis. And that's my message to you.
Michael, I have been with you and seen you work with people on the highest levels of government and human rights commissions. I've seen you on the streets working with homeless people, helping them in their lives. Tell us a little bit about what this interfaith peace building means to you.
Thank you, Victor. And Victor, you know, I was once in the unenviable position of having to tell a renowned civil rights leader, ask a renowned civil rights leader and a pastor of the Third Baptist Church, Reverend Amos Brown, if he would speak for 5 minutes. And his response was, Michael, he goes, it takes me that long to clear my throat. I will attempt to be faithful to the timekeeper and do justice to the work of the council. And in speaking of our council, I'm hoping that I'm going to speak for the many, many councils throughout both the United States and the world, which are cooperation circles of URI. Our council, and by the way, interfaith councils don't just happen. They are called into existence, and usually in response to a crisis. Our council was no exception. 30 years ago, a mayor of San Francisco, and imagine this, San Francisco, which is accused of being one of the most irreligious cities in the United States, our council was called into existence by a mayor of that city. And that mayor, being Greek like myself, knew how to use guilt effectively. And he called a bunch of religious leaders into his office and said, I have people sleeping on the steps of City Hall. You're religious people, you have a moral obligation to respond. And they did. And what started out to be a one-year emergency shelter just completed 30 years of service. We have 4 congregate churches on Cathedral Hill and in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco who each give up a month of time in order to house between 60 and 100 homeless men every night between the Sunday before Thanksgiving to the end of March. We have 55 congregations that prepare meals and serve and we work with our local social service agency, Episcopal Community Services, to oversee the operation. And this particular shelter, called the Interfaith Winter Shelter, is perhaps one of the most valued in the city because it's a place where those who have no hope feel safe, valued, and loved. And that is because the expression of communities of faith is being acted upon in serving. And I would venture to say that the work of our council is more involved with service. I didn't use the word action, Rabbi. Service than dialogue. We believe that by bringing people together in acts of service, that we build relationships of trust. And those relationships of trust, we believe, are the foundation for authentic dialogue. And at that moment, we've got 30 years of relationships that we have cultivated. And when there are times where difficult conversations have to happen, the people in the room know one another, and they trust one another. And that is where those 30 years of cultivating trust really actualize themselves and enable us to be good peace builders. In San Francisco, we have 800 religious institutions. Not only houses of worship, but we have judicatories, where, like the Catholic Archdiocese and the Episcopal Diocese, the Board of Rabbis, United Muslims, that are headquartered in San Francisco, but have a regional scope. We work together with the academic and healthcare institutions that have religious roots. And back in the Great Recession, we began convening the CEOs of the major faith-based social service agencies. And there are 15 of them. And at that time, it's hard to believe San Francisco had a budget deficit. And the mayor had to tell the folk that were providing these incredible services that you need to cut your budgets by 30%. So programs and staff disappeared. These agencies, being as big as they are, didn't have the capacity to convene themselves. So we brought them together and helped to develop the narrative of their collective impact and to be their advocate. And then when tech moved into San Francisco, and it seemed like we were swimming in money, those budgets never were fully restored, a lot of those agencies went to renew their leases. And those leases got to be too expensive. And so a lot of the nonprofits, like people in our city, became displaced. And so we took this issue of the displacement of nonprofits to the San Francisco Chronicle, and lo and behold, as a result of that, our mayor at that time developed a task force on the displacement of nonprofits, and he set up through the Northern California Community Loan Fund a fund to give grants to those nonprofits that would mitigate the impact on the clients they were serving. This is some of the stuff that we do. We are very, very blessed to have a very vibrant and active religious community. We are involved in everything from immigration to housing affordability. We're valued members of the Complete Count Committee for the 2020 census because we know how to find the hard to find, but also we are trusted partners and we are going to protect those people. But the monies that come back from the census are to provide incredible and integral, critical funds for the programs that our agencies provide. I see my good timekeeper. I'm just going to close with one thing. I listened to Secretary Schultz talk about the attacks on houses of worship. And traditionally, our role is to put out a statement or to bring people together for a vigil. And those are powerful and important signs of solidarity. But this time we said, I saw our mayor at every one of these vigils, and if she said one thing, it stuck in my mind. People should feel safe when they go to their houses of worship. I'm sorry to have to share this, but the action that we are taking in response is to bring together law enforcement and the Department of Public Health and Emergency Management and our brothers in the Anti-Defamation League and other groups like this to be able to put on a convening where we can share those resources with our congregation leaders, because God forbid it should happen in one of our houses of worship. I want to be able to sleep better at night, Mr. Secretary, knowing that we did our part. And so I hope that I answered the question.
Thank you, Michael.
And did justice.
You did indeed.
Thank you.
During our time together over the next 2 days, we'll have times where we're in small group dialogue. We'll have times where we're having Q&A from audience to panel. We have only a few minutes left for us, but what I'd like to ask of our panelists is, was there something that you heard in each other's commentary that particularly struck you that you'd like to either comment on or pursue a little bit? Is there some issue that we raised, that you heard raised, that you think that you'd like to expand on, or that you'd like to speak to, hear others expand on?
Can I start?
Would you like to? Yes, Maria. No, you go. Microphone.
Rabbi, you are right, and I was challenged by your presentation. I was thinking and reflecting about what you said, and dialogue is an action, and my experience on dialogue has been a learning experience itself. We learn a lot when we are in conversation with others. Listening is an exercise that we really need. It is not only speaking, but also being capable of a very active listening, and because it's active listening, it's an action. Thank you for putting this up.
Audrey.
After the rabbi's presentation, I said, Rabbi, what you're talking about is marriage. Because you're moving from talking to try to understand, and people, frankly, can live together for years and not ever have deep dialogue or understanding, but together, collectively, they understand that they have to have a household income, that they have to raise the children together, so they're implementing every day those actions that are necessary to meet their duties and responsibilities in daily living. Will they ever get to the point where they will understand each other? Maybe not. And that's where the role of attorneys at the end of the journey, when you've had enough, also come into play. So having communities come together is important, and we start with the family, and if we examine the family life, we know what you are talking about and how difficult it is to achieve. But that doesn't stop people from getting together and trying every day to achieve it.
Thank you, Audrey. Radia and then Danny.
Yes, I wanted to get back on what you said, Reverend Jennifer, about the question of spirituality and the spiritual sustainability. It's a huge question for us in Coexister, because in France, it's like spirituality belongs at home, belongs in the house of worship, and when you're not part of a religion or a religious community, you're not allowed to have a spiritual life. And we ask ourselves on how, why is the question of spirituality is important in our work. Because we could have, and why interfaith and interspiritual cooperation, there is something a little bit more than just intercultural or the other. It's a real question we haven't answered yet, but one of our answers is that there is a substance, it's substantial, it's a substantial identity. There are resources, there are outside resources, but also inside resources that are really strong. The second is that it's chosen. Like you can change faith. You choose your faith. It's something that you really choose inside your heart, because you can say that you're, I don't know, a Muslim, but in your heart you know that you're something else. In your heart you know what is your faith. And the third thing what we believe in is that, like, from your faith there can be great contribution for the good, but also for the bad. And it's a choice that you have to make every day. Every day I chose to take up into my faith to do good, and it's a choice that we have to make. And when you put that into interfaith, that's where the magic happens. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. Danny, and then come back to Jen.
So I wanted to respond to what Michael mentioned in terms of this issue of safety, especially this past year, given what we've all experienced around the globe. And what I've been thinking about in response to this is that we actually need to move beyond just protection, which is obviously vital, to something more visionary. And I think we need to experiment with what it means to create multi-religious institutions. So there are experiments. I know that there are churches that house synagogues and vice versa, and same thing with mosques. I know there's an experiment. There's a building going up in Berlin, Germany, I believe, House of One, which I think is a very interesting model that we should be thinking about. University campuses, as the chaplain mentioned to us, have these multi-faith spaces. Why should it only be on a university campus? I think we have to move beyond the sense of separateness, which is the source of targeting a particular religious community, and we've got to create opportunities to actually be in each other's spaces, which will create the kind of daily, weekly, monthly contact. I feel funny that I go to a synagogue in my community regularly. Why should I only be engaging with my fellow Jews around spiritual issues on a regular basis? I would love to go to a place of worship where I can do my traditional worship, but also engage with other people who are doing their worship and actually create a multi-religious community. And we need to create those spaces and opportunities, and I think that will be a kind of response to this issue of religious violence and the attacks that we've experienced.
Very good, Danny. Jen.
That's really beautiful, and I want to respond to both of you because you're just so brilliant. You know, one of the things that was coming up for me is Radia, when you were talking, and one of the things I wrote down, because I take notes vigilantly when people talk, you said that interfaith cooperation is a practice. And as we think about our work and talk about spiritual sustainability, part of the sustainability piece is about practicing doing community. And who is your community? The people you do life with, right? And I think as spiritual and faith leaders, whether it be a prayer practice or something that we've committed ourselves to, we kind of have that muscle, right, to know that it won't be perfect. And I think I'm speaking as a 31-year-old millennial. I've noticed a particular appetite for young people to have a recommitment to practice, to rooting, particularly as we think about the number of things we are regularly exposed to. And so when I hear you talk about practice, I was like, yeah, girl, practice. Like, part of the spiritual sustainability is about who you practice doing life with. And if we aren't practicing doing life with one another, I love the image of multi-faith worship spaces, right? Which is a space where we can practice doing life together. If we're not doing that, we're only feeding into this idea of separatism, and I would argue a crisis of loneliness here in the United States that makes people feel more and more isolated. And I'll say, Victor, as somebody who lives in the southern United States, and that's seen a rise in anti-Black racism, white supremacy, and white nationalism that literally has been on my doorstep, right? And as somebody who is married to a Jewish man, so I practice daily interfaith cooperation in my marriage. It's less the interfaith and more the marriage part. But, you know, I'm constantly concerned with the fact that the future children that I want to birth into the world will carry these dual identities that are hated right now. And one thing that folks have gotten really good at who are, I'm going to use this language and I want to wrestle with it a little bit, but who I might view as my enemy, right? The people for whom my humanity is not viewed as equal and or valued, they're really good at creating spaces of belonging and acceptance and love for folks. And so I wonder what it is that we can do to create those counter spaces that allow people to practice doing community together in a way that doesn't require them to be perfect, doesn't require, at least I know among my quote-unquote woke friends, like for people to have a particular politic or a particular worldview, but to just practice doing life together, cooking together, singing together, going through hard times together, because that is going to be the resiliency muscle that we build up to encounter some of the most urgent crises of our days, whether it be climate justice and what's happening to our planet or other things. So I just wanted to offer that up as a reflection on both of your remarks.
Thank you, Jen. We have just a couple of minutes. I'm going to turn to Michael, and then Phil, I'm going to come back to you and ask you one thing to close us with.
And in fact, my remarks were going to be directed towards Phil and to Victor, too, an expression of appreciation, because I think Phil's presence here and just what URI does to remind us on whose land we find ourselves and the stewardship role we need to play. I work in a chapel, the Presidio Chapel, the main post chapel, which was a former military chapel. And there's a large mural in that chapel, the history of the Presidio. And it was done by a protege of Diego Rivera's, a fellow by the name of Victor Arnatoff. There are some controversial murals that he has done in San Francisco, but this one in particular, if you are in San Francisco and you are in the Presidio, you should come and see. I had the privilege of bringing Chief Tony Cerda of the Castelloni Nation, Carmel Aloni Nation, to visit, and he said, I have never seen a piece of public art where such a proportion was given to the Aloni people. And I was pleased to be able to have shown him this, but I think sometimes in our interfaith work, our indigenous brothers and sisters are not given that proportionate place. And your presence here and URI's constant reminder to us where we are is something that I take home with me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Phil, there is a sacred place that we all inhabit. This Mother Earth, that is in fact a shared sacred space for us all. And you have continually brought that to our attention. Can you close us out with a few words that end our session and open us into the next?
Okay. Maybe I'll sing.
That would be lovely.
This song was sung at the origin, at the sacred ceremonies that launched URI. Is this working?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. And so it's just very simple. It calls upon the power of life to behold us, all of us. And then it says the earth and the water, it's sacred. The plant people, they're sacred. The animal people, they're sacred. And we put the whole pipe together. The bowl is womankind, the foundation of life. The stem, which goes pretty quick, is the male. And so you have life. If you turn it this way, that's the human being with the mouth here. That we're all sacred, is what it says. I'll just do a couple of verses here. You can join me if you wish, those who have learned it. Wayankie, 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 Chanupa Kile, Wakayelo, Wayankie.